it's not about you. It's really, stop taking things so personally. It's really not about you.
Right. I think that's like might be like, I've been hearing this recently, like the one theme in life, like not everything's about you.
Right.
Hello. Good morning, Shira.
Good morning, Esty.
How are you today?
Good.
Okay. So today we're going to talk about the topic of friendships. Friends. And I think we have to make the disclaimer that we have very different views, I think, on this topic. I guess we're going to find out more today how different they are or how the same they are. I just know based on past conversations that we've had, we've definitely expressed different views on it. Yes. So we'll see what comes up today and how different our views actually are.
You know, actually, when you just said that, when you said the word friends, like inside myself, there was this warm, like fuzzy feeling of, yeah, I love my friends. My friends are so important to me. And I think the word probably brings up a lot of different emotions for different people.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, I find that fascinating because that what's happening between us is probably what happens with friendships, right? It's on the fly of the moment. We don't go into like a friend meeting saying, let me prepare what I'm going to talk about. We sort of just show up, right? We say, let's go here or let's go on a walk, and conversation just flows. Right. And I find that kind of apropos that here we're trying to say, let's just see how it flows and what comes up.
Right. Like a similar experience to what friendship actually is.
Right. And so it's funny how we had different emotional reactions to that, where I was like, wow, this is fuzzy. This is warm. This is exciting. Like, I'm thinking this is fun. Right. But I totally get how that can also be like nerve wracking or what's going to be and uncertain. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that this is a topic that I know that I personally feel this way, that I feel like silly to talk about. You know, like, let's say, I don't mean like in this kind of environment. I mean, like if I'm processing at home with, let's say, my husband, a situation about a friend, that the feeling of like silliness, like I shouldn't be talking about this at my age. I feel like silly to talk to another friend about a friend. Like you're not in high school anymore, I feel like would be the, you know, or this feels like high school. I feel like I've heard before when I've, let's say, talked to friends about this kind of thing.
I always like preface like my venting sessions or like my talking about it with, let's say, my husband or with other friends about like, I really shouldn't be saying this, or like, I'm so over this. Why do I need to do this? But I'm going to do it anyways, but I still need it. And, but there's like an embarrassment inside of like, did I not get through high school properly? Or did I not get through elementary school? Like, why am I still in this space? And I need to remind myself that friends are everlasting. Like these dilemmas, it's not about friends necessarily. It's just relationships, and relationships will always come along with something that has to be spoken about, or dilemmas and difficulties and emotional pain sometimes, or positive emotions as well. So it's not that it's a child topic. Right. It's something that as adults we face in a more mature way, but we face also.
Why do you think it's so ingrained in us that we can only talk about this? Like that it's inappropriate to talk about now, that we feel silly? Well, it's not. Like, we know that it's not. As professionals, we know that this is so important. Yet when talking about it right now, I feel that, you know, the silliness coming up of like, this is not so age appropriate. Why do you think, like, how did that happen? Why do we think that it's not appropriate at our age to talk anymore about friendships? We'll talk about romantic relationships all the time. That's appropriate. So why do we feel like at this stage in our life, it's not necessarily so appropriate to be so consumed by friends?
Right. And I like how you phrase that question, because with romantic relationships, there's like freedom to just to speak.
No matter what age.
Right. No matter what's going on, like there's no shame attached to talking about it, at least, you know, for me. But when it comes to friends, there is that embarrassment of, I should have got through this already. And romantic partners are friends. Right. Right. And it's supposed to be friendships. There's that bonding. With friends, like there is something.
Why?
And, you know, if I think back to myself, I'm just imagining like, when, let's say, I had spoken about a friendship problem, it was always like, oh, like you, like there, it was looked down upon a bit, or it was said like, oh, like when you're older, you won't need these things.
Right. So I think there is this, maybe I'm thinking right now, it's coming to me, this mentality of like, when you get married and when you have kids, they're going to fill all your needs. So you're not going to need friends anymore. So then if you're talking about friends, it's like, and I think I've even had a friend tell me this once, like, yeah, but you're married now and you have kids now. Like, so maybe there's this expectation of when you're an adult and you're working and you're married and you have a house, like friends shouldn't be a concern anymore because it's not important. But that's not true. We know that's not true.
Right. Not at all. And the word that comes to my mind is like drama. Like as a kid,
I don't want,
like
yes.
as kids, it's always like such kid drama, such
Right.
teen drama.
Right.
So you expect when you get older, I'm not going to have like friend drama anymore. Like,
and I'm embarrassed if I do have friend drama.
Right. Like I don't have time for this. Like, and I think to your point also of people saying like, when you get older, you have your family, you have your kids, like that's supposed to fulfill you. And it's like friendships become about only convenience of like, let's go out on Sunday on a walk when I have an hour free, rather than just calling them up in the middle of the day where I know they're working, I'm working. It's, maybe I have like a 2-minute break. It's not going to be enough for me to really flesh it out. But I do think that we still need those long conversations. Maybe we're not staying up till 5 a.m. and it's not going to be the same, but there are aspects of my life where I still do need that.
Right. Yeah.
But we have all of these beliefs, right, about what friends should look like. And a lot of times, like when I have a friend, if I'm on the receiving side of the conversation where someone's telling me about a friendship problem that they're having, like a friend of mine is talking about a friendship problem or even a family member problem, afterwards it's always like, why can't I just get over it? Right. It always like is summarized by that of like, it's really not a big deal, or I really shouldn't let this get to me, or it really shouldn't bother me. And in that, what I hear is that there's no permission to feel these feelings because friendships are only allowed in certain capacities. And if it's causing you this amount of stress, it's an indication that you shouldn't be in it, or it's an indication that you shouldn't like it, or that it's an indication that you're maybe doing something wrong. And I think that's an error. Because relationships do have complications, and they do need, we do need the ability to vent. So I think just to summarize it all is that it's not a silly topic to talk about. It's something that is really relevant, and friends do come with stories. And even though we feel like if it's causing me so much drama, why go there? It's just a part of life. Relationships are complicated. Relationships bring up stuff.
Right. And I think that it's important for people, like some people, they put too much emphasis on, let's say, their family life and their work life. And if they, maybe felt the space to be able to put it on friends, that would lighten the load,
Yeah. And, back to your point earlier of the family is the everything in this stage. Really, friends are also. Friends are just as important. It's not like friends are just childhood. Friends are teenage. Friends, you need friends to carry you throughout life. It doesn't have to be 100 friends. It can be 5 friends. It can be 2 good friends. My grandmother has this one friend she's had her since the 6th grade, and they speak every single night on the phone for 3 hours. And I think it's fascinating how, they have each other for so many years. And, we're talking how many, at least, 60, 70 years that they have each other. And so friends really carry us throughout life. It's not just a childhood need. It's an adult need. It's a human need. And I think a lot of people can relate to that is that they 100%. Go into marriage, and if they have a history of struggling, let's say in their teen years with friendships, I think they then go into marriage assuming that finally I'm going to fit in. Finally, I'm going to have my person. And it's not always that way because as good as of a friend that your spouse can be, you need other friends. Your spouse is never going to fulfill all your friend relationships. And so that can be really disappointing. Yeah.
And now they kind of have this like, okay, how do I meet people? How do I get to know people? So some people live, I guess, in neighborhoods where it is a more social neighborhood, and some people don't. So there's this like search of like, how do I actually meet new people? How do I make new friends?
I think step 1 is probably community, right? What's going on? Go to community events, go to, if you have a shul that's making, go to shul on Shabbos. Go to if you have children to pick up your child from school, see the other mothers there. When you make a birthday party, invite the mothers also.
Go to like the school dinners.
Yeah. And also just through certain hobbies, like, if you're in an exercise class, if you're in an art class, if you are in college, friends from college, just if you work, colleagues, Colleagues can find friends and can become friends. And sometimes people have this misconception of like, they categorize their life where work is work, school is school, friends are friends, and they don't want to mix them up. I think that's especially by work. There's that fear of, will my friendship interfere with my productivity at the job?
This is a whole like dual work relationships is a whole nother conversation. And I was telling you earlier today, share it, is that Esther Perel has like a whole podcast series on work relationships because it's so complex.
Yeah.
So yeah, like some friendships happen, you know, or I think about all my different work experiences. Like I had these friends at work that I thought were my real good friends, but then when I left the job or they left the job, I don't really know if I have any friends left from old jobs. So it's interesting what that meant from the friendships of how we weren't able to stay in touch, even though I thought for sure we would because we were such good friends.
Right. And, you know, there's the question of what binds us.
Right.
Right. So at work, like, is it just that you're sharing an experience and day in, day out, like there's somebody there? Or is this a relationship that can last longer, even when you're not sharing a task or you're not going into the office daily? Like, what's binding you?
Right. And I think that work, you could feel so close to people because you're there every single day and they're seeing the changes that's going on in your life and you're sharing things with them. But then I find it fascinating how some work relationships, when work is done, doesn't actually last.
Right. And, you know, sometimes those are like situational friends.
Right.
Where, you know, back to the school bus, you sit next to each other every single day. You're in the classroom every single day together. And so it works. But afterwards, like at least in our stage of life, it's not as much circumstantial because we have to put effort into it.
Right. We don't have so much time.
Right. And so it's not as easy as it was in the teen years because there's so many more responsibilities that we have to take care of and tasks that we have to take care of that friendships can become an effort. Like it doesn't happen as organically as it does in earlier years. And I think that confuses some people of why would I have to put effort into friendships? Like they're just supposed to come, and they're not. Like they don't. If you don't put effort in, you will not have it. You have to show up. You have to approach people and introduce yourself. You have to, you know, sometimes you even have to put money into it, right? You have to go out to eat and pay for the dinner or invite guests and host. And those are all ways where you're working hard at the friendships. But if it's something that you value and something that you really want in your life, then it makes sense to put it into that. Right.
So I just want to say, like, so far we're not disagreeing, and I thought we were going to have more tension here. I thought this was going to be a little bit more fun, a little bit more fighting.
Yeah.
So far we're on the same page. But what about for the people that they feel like they're always initiating? Because I know, you know, we talked about this, like we feel that way. Like we're more initiators. That's our personality.
Right.
And sometimes it's a lot. Like sometimes I want to see it reciprocated back.
Right.
I don't want to feel like I'm always the one reaching out.
Yeah. And, you know, me personally, I take the approach of because I value friends so much and I realize how important it is in my life, I really don't care if I'm initiating that much because I know that the reason why others aren't, I assume that they're either too busy. And it's not that they're rejecting. It's just that they don't either have the ability to do it or there's so many responsibilities on their plate. But I know that they are thankful once I do it. And so that appreciation of it doesn't make me feel as resentful when I'm the one who's doing it. And honestly, if I was, you know, being true with myself, I think there's an aspect of it feels better for me to be the initiator because my schedule is also so hard. Right. So this way, if I'm the coordinator, I know that it's going to work within my day-to-day life. Okay. So maybe there's like a control aspect to it too.
So let me ask you a question then. We can make this a mini therapy session for me right now. Let me ask you a question. So I don't mind being like the planner, like you're saying, and the organizer, as long as I see that there's like this kind of mutual give and take. Like, yeah, I'm usually the one hosting in my house, like if a Shabbos meal, because I know people don't like the mess and they don't like the prep, and that doesn't bother me. Like it doesn't faze me. So if me and a friend are like, oh, we want to do a meal, I'm like, yeah, let's do it by me. That way I know it's no stress for her because it's my pleasure. But yet sometimes I feel like I'm the one who's inviting more. And then that's hurtful to me. Like, why are they not inviting me back? And here's the twist, right? Because if we can give the excuse like people are busy, they want to do it, but they don't have the time and the space and the energy to invite. But if you invite them, they're so excited. How come I see them inviting other people?
Yeah, so that's where it gets hurtful, and that's when you can start taking it more personal. Of if I'm doing the same action as somebody else, and somebody else is received, and I'm not received, so what does that say about me and my friendship with this individual? Like it's conflictual,
right? And I think that this is for me what comes up the most in friendships.
Where you feel like there's a comparing and contrasting between your friendship versus another friendship to that same person.
Right. I'm not saying that I see this across the board with all my friends. Like I think I have my core group of friends that have been my friends since childhood that had moved to different states. So I'm not necessarily seeing them so often. I'm not necessarily, you know, we're not engaging in that every day, but it's more the kind of the people that I'm in this every day of like, hey, do you want to go for a walk? Do you want to get a drink? You know, this kind of back and forth that I'm noticing it more in. And that's, I guess, a question. And that's when I start questioning, and I'm curious in your opinion. That's when I start questioning, like, okay, so maybe this friendship isn't good. But then I know that we kind of have this different view on friendships, so where I maybe view friendships more intensely. Mm-hmm. So that's why I'm asking. I want to like kind of broaden my horizon here. Am I making sense?
Yeah. I mean, can you say a little bit more about what you mean that you view friendships more intensely? Like, because underneath all this is an expectation,
right,
of what you want to get out of the friendship.
Right. So we've talked before, and I've heard you say, I think I've heard you say something about a friend once before about how she felt that, you know, she couldn't find any friends on the same level as her. Do you remember what I'm talking about? And I felt relating to that as myself. Like when you're talking, I felt myself relating to that. Thinking that like my expectations on friends might be a little bit strong. Like, I don't know if that makes sense.
You know, it reminds me reminds me of a story of mine, and maybe I'll just share with you like how I thought about it. And I don't know if that'll answer it, but maybe just to build up on the topic is, I have a lot of friends from my days in Israel. We lived there for a very long time, and of course it's such a transient place, so you're always picking up new people. It's not like it's consistent people. Right. And so over time, right, when you're not in the same time zone, it's just hard to keep those up. And so there was one specific friend who I would call once a week, once every 2 weeks. And it was great, the conversation. Those are the types of friends that you just like pick up no matter what. It could be 6 months and you still reconnect. And those are the best friends to have. But I remember like one specific person, we were always playing phone tag. Like it was never good. And it was a very close relationship, but for some reason we just couldn't contact each other. I felt like it was the olden days where I needed to like send her a letter of like my life for the past year, and she would send back like a telegram with her life from that year. It was just impossible for us to like connect. Our schedules were just so off. And so I just started like voice noting her sometimes, and then like she would voice note back like 5 days later with like a little update. It wasn't like a conversation like in the moment. It was just more updates at that point. And then I went out with a group of friends, and they start talking about how they recently, just spoke with this friend that I'm having such a hard time getting in touch with. And my initial reaction was like, you got through to her.
Right. Yeah.
And so I was very hurt of what does that say about me to her? Right. And so at first I wanted to like, be curious. And then I said, well, how does her schedule focus on the other person? How does her schedule connect with the other's schedule? And my first reaction was, I am so insulted. Right. Like, does she not like me, or do I want this more than she wants it? Is the desire equal? Okay, yes. Right. And back to that, even as I'm talking about this, right, back to that silliness of, come on, just grow up. Like, who cares? Right.
But this is all the scenario that I was having a hard time explaining. These are all, these are all the feelings that were coming up.
And then afterwards, like when I was sitting there, I said to myself, and I think this is my general approach to friends, is I just like having friends, and it's going to come with really hurtful parts. Right. But I value the friendship over the annoyances of life. Right. And so with her, I stopped and I said, well, maybe she likes her better. Maybe. Right. That's okay. Or maybe she has the ability to be close to many people, or maybe their schedules just aligned perfectly.
I like certain people better than other people. Right. I'm like trying to sit with that, what that's like,
Right. And, to give other people permission to like others more than they like us, or to like us for certain things and like others for other things. We don't have to be that everything, that all encompassing friend, but there's also enough love for everyone. Right. And so I stopped the insult and the hurt and saying, yeah, maybe I'm not liked as much. Right. So that's like worst case scenario is that I want this maybe more than she does, or maybe I'm more invested in the relationship.
That's a scary thing for many people. Or let me talk about myself, because this whole session has been about myself. I think that's a scary thing to hear.
To hear that somebody might want the relationship
I might want a relationship
and you want it more
than someone else. I don't know. That feels very unsettling.
Right. Yeah.
So it's just, I guess, sitting with that and being comfortable with the fact like there's going to be some people that like other people more than you. There's going to be some people that you want the friendship more. What do you think for people?
Well, I think inherently in that is saying like, I don't want to be rejected. I don't want to feel dumb. Like, I think we have a lot of like, stories like that of like, if you don't want me, I don't want you.
Right. Yeah.
Exactly. I always have to be the better one. Right. And what does it feel like to maybe sit knowing that I'm not always so exciting, or I'm not going to be that friend to everybody.
Right. And I think that's important, what you just said, to everybody, because if this is the overall theme with all your friendships, then I think that might need a bigger discussion. Right. I'm talking about like, you have a kind of scenario where you have some friends where you do feel like that equal give or take, and you do feel that you're desirable. And then there's these 1 or 2 friendships that you don't. And then the question comes like, I guess in my head would be like, okay, so maybe let me cut these friendships off.
Right.
And it's saying no. And you're saying, no, we don't have to do that. You can just accept the friendship as it is.
Right.
You can sit in the discomfort of knowing that you might not be her most favorite person, which is fine because you have friends that you love, but aren't your most favorite person either.
Right. And also I love when I'm with her. So even if it's not equal, I still really like it.
Right.
And so she might not like me as much as she likes the other person, or like I'm making this assumption because I never spoke to her about this. Right. Maybe if I can get through to her.
If you hear this, Shira's trying to get through to you.
Exactly. Yeah, now I'm going to get like 500 phone calls.
I feel like I'm going to have a couple.
Am I like putting all my friendships on the verge here of like insecurity?
Yes. Wasn't you? No, not talking about you, of course not.
Right. Like
you are my favorite person.
Yeah, but I think for me it's worthwhile because I really enjoy when we're together.
Right.
Even if it's not the ultimate closeness, or even if it's not, exactly equal, and the effort is not reciprocated, but like when I'm with her, it feels good, and I know she does also. Right. I think she values me when in those moments. Like it's not like I'm chasing somebody who doesn't want me at all. It's just not equal input.
Right. And I think that's an important thing to point about how you feel when you're with a friend. Afterwards, that feeling, because, and I think we touched upon this a little bit in the last podcast about identity, but I think that it's important to, if you're with a friend and you're leaving with a not good feeling, then there's questions to ask. Is this someone that you should be spending time with? What's going on that's causing these feelings?
And not necessarily are those feelings going to be coming from the person. They might be coming from your own
and then
thoughts
that might
about
be
relationships.
Some exploration that you have to do. And I think that's a really good point because, I'm trying to be open-minded here, but I think my reaction would be like, if I'm leaving with a not good feeling with a friend, then the friend's not good for me, and then boom, friendship over. I don't mean like, let's cut the person out, but like, okay, I'm not going to invite them over for a meal next time. And you're saying maybe explore those feelings because that might be coming from your own insecurities, which have really nothing to do with the friendship.
Right.
If it's in a relationship where I'm more secure about, and I know that these are really coming from my own insecurities, then okay, fine, then I can sit with those feelings. But when it's relationships where I'm really not sure about, then it's very fearful to sit with those feelings of discomfort because what if they don't want me around?
And what if there's like a big truth to it?
Yeah. So I think that could be really scary for many people.
Yeah. And I think the way I also would see that is generally at least when I've met people, majority of people are nice and they are good and they want to connect.
Right.
And they want to be friendly, and if they're lonely, right, they want more. They want more people. They might not know how to access it. I think like that's where the struggle comes in of like not knowing how to access it either in terms of scheduling, or not knowing how to access it in terms of social skills, or not knowing how to access it in terms of vulnerability, of the ability to deal with all of these thoughts that come up as you enter into a relationship. But ultimately, like deep down, I think everyone really just wants to connect and really wants friends. And I think like when I approach that, of saying at the end of the day, like most people just want to be nice and want to be friendly, then it's less intimidating because I'm not expecting as much rejection. So if it's a little bit awkward or if it's a little bit uncomfortable, I'm not taking it as personally.
Right.
Also, I try to put myself in my shoes. Mm-hmm. So let's say when this person is rejecting me, there's been times where I've rejected people. But even when I'm around people that I don't like, maybe they're not as interesting or I'm not connecting with them, I don't feel like I'm angry with them or I'm annoyed with them.
There's
I think
no
it's
bad feelings.
Right. I think like I'm always taking the stance of like, okay, this is not so exciting. It's not that I don't like them. It's just that it's not. If I had a choice of what to be with, I wouldn't necessarily choose that. Right. But it's not that there's anything bad about them. Like, no. As children, it's like the bullying phase where people are being bullied and like then your self-esteem is crushed and there's like if I don't want to be with you, you're not okay. And friends are so important in childhood because if you're not friends with anyone in school, you're not going to survive. Right. That's your whole childhood. We're talking about like 12 years. Yeah. Whereas in adulthood, like if you don't have a friend, like you're still functioning, you're still surviving without it. But there is some loss, but it's not as fundamental as it is as a child.
Right. That's for sure. So I think that, all these feelings that, I'm noticing right now coming up, and I'm sure many people feel that way as well. I think it ties in very strongly to people's identity of like what friendship means for them.
Right.
How they're perceived.
Like what you expect in a friendship.
Right.
And if you look at your friends, I mean, I can ask, are all your friends the same?
No. Right. Because they're all maybe representing different parts of ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like, if you would reflect on the different friendships that you have, like, what are your friends to you in those different ways, and what do they fill in you?
That's a good question. I think there are certain friends where I can just be like light and breezy and just have a fun time and not think about like, hard stuff and not think about work and just have a good fun time. And then there are other friends where we can get down to like deep core, topics and issues and good emotional conversations. So I think those are like the two kind of spectrums of friends that I have, and I appreciate both and I enjoy both.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And friends are going to give us such different things, right? And it can be different from one to the other. I remember at my engagement party, and then also afterwards at the shower, like I was getting comments of, whoa, like this is such a wide spectrum of people. Right. Like, because if those people would try to be friends, it probably wouldn't work because they come from such different backgrounds and such different personalities. Right. But I was able to relate to them at different stages of life and in different ways. And so we do have variety.
Right. I noticed that at some people's engagement parties, you notice that like, oh, wow, they have a very diverse group of friends.
Yes. Very, very diverse. And like, so it's interesting, like if you go to a party and everyone is the same versus everyone is different, like, and it's pretty cool to see like, what are they bringing out that maybe another one wouldn't bring out.
Right. Right. I do think, and tell me if you feel the same way, I do think that, I mean, if I had to line up all my friends, I think there are some very similar core traits that attracts me to certain people.
Like baseline qualities.
Yeah. Yeah. So I do think I've noticed that, just thinking right now, a few friends popping in my head, like they all have some similar, some similar trait.
Yeah.
Do you
like
think
there's commonality?
Right.
I would say the same. I mean, I'd have to think about it a little bit more, but I think that I would agree with that there are some common factors.
Right. And I think that we have to, I think it's important for people to surround themselves with friends that are good for them.
Mm-hmm. Like good influences.
Good influences, good people, like, we say like, that's a good people, you know what I mean? I think that people who celebrate your joys and people who, are there for you in pain.
Want the best for you.
Yeah. You want to feel that the people that you surround yourself, you can trust.
Right. Yeah. And to trust that they're going to be available when you need, to trust that they can get to know you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we all have, especially because you're saying that now, and like now friendships become situational, we all have friends that we may have picked up along the way that if we really sat and looked at it, is this a good person for us? Mm-hmm. And then we have, some questions to ask.
Right. And, I think as we get older also, like, it's not just about, is this a good friend for me? Is this a good friend for my spouse? Right. Is this like, if I'm friends with this person, is this a good influence for my marriage, right? Or for my children, right? Is this a good influence on the family? Like, do I want my family to be exposed? And when you're doing couples meals or if you're doing family meals together, like that means your children are going to be playing with a friend's child. Right. And how do you want that to be, right? So it becomes a bit more complicated when it's not just about what type of friend do I want. When you have friends that enter into your family life, it's a whole different agenda. And but then again, like you can have friends that don't enter into the family realm. Right. You can have a friend that you go out with, but that is never coming home to your home.
I've definitely heard from clients and friends, my spouse doesn't like that friend. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a big topic. Like, what does that mean? Like, why does your spouse not like that friend? That's always my first question. Like, why?
Yeah. I mean, I remember like somebody telling me that their spouse was jealous of the friend, of like, you love the friend more than you love me.
That could be really painful.
Yeah. And also, sometimes it's a bad influence of, I don't like how you come home after being with that person. Or this person is setting certain values in you that I don't have. Right. Or this, I can see this of, let's say, someone is higher maintenance and their spouse is not. Right. And they're going out with friends that are higher maintenance. Every time they go out, they want to spend more money. They want to buy more things. And it's not in the couple's value system. Right. So I can see a spouse saying, I really don't like when you go out with her. Right. Because you're coming home, sort of your mindset is shifting after that experience.
Yeah. So I think for people who like tell me that, like my reaction is like, be curious, like explore that conversation more. Like why, You know, what's going on, right? What about you is coming out that your spouse, let's say, doesn't like, and just, you know, talk about it more to get more information, and then see like what you guys can do about it together.
And then also, like, where can this friend fit in your life? It doesn't mean you have to cut off a friend. Right. There's something that you are attracted to that you really like, but it might need to be modified. Right. And maybe you don't go shopping together. Only go out to eat. You know, maybe only go walking in the park and it doesn't cost money, and then you're not, you know, dealing with spending habits. You're not seeing that as much. But because generally when we're around friends, there's a peer pressure that comes out, even if we're not focusing on it, as you're talking about, like, oh, how did you spend Shabbos? Versus how I spent Shabbos. Oh, you spent Shabbos in a hotel? We spent Shabbos at home. How much does a hotel cost? Like, oh, you spent $2,000? Or, oh, where'd you go for midwinter vacation? We went here. You went there. That's more fancy, right? So your standards are potentially rising because we always want to fit into our social circles. And when we hear about what other people are doing, it automatically can bring up some jealousy or some competition, or even just some desire of, I wish I had that.
It's the famous peer pressure.
And it doesn't stop in childhood. Right. You know, as a kid, it might be about certain toys that, you know, they have, or, but then as an adult, peer pressure comes up with, you have a nicer house. Like, what car do you drive? Where are you taking your kids? Where do you shop? How many guests are you having?
So that could be really hard for someone who's like surrounded by people that, you know, for some reason brings up those like insecurities or those things that they want that they can't have.
Yeah. And, you know, I mean, something I remember the story when I lived in Israel days of talking to somebody, and she was telling me how she was pregnant, and they were very close together in age, her children. And it came up in conversation where she says, you know, listen, I'm really not ready to have more kids. But the reason I'm having more is because all of my friends are up to the next number. And I feel like I'm not going to have a social group if I don't match up the numbers. And
that's wow.
It was really open of her to recognize that, but also that she made a choice in saying, like, this is why I'm going to go through with another pregnancy and have another child, even though it might not be good for our marriage now. You see how your social environment influences your choices. Right. And, you know, it can be vice versa, where you might be doing something positive, right? It can be used for the better. It could be used for the better or for the...
So I think that what you said before is important, because there are certain people that, let's say, are going to pressure us to do things that are, you know, not in the best interest of ourselves. And it doesn't mean that you have to cut out that relationship. You might have to modify it. Right. So, and I think that's another interesting point also that you said about like the spending money, because I remember at a stage in my life when I was trying to cut back a little bit on my spending, and I wasn't working a lot at that time. So I had a lot of free time. I didn't want to call friends because I didn't want to spend money. I knew that if I'd call a friend, we'd go out to eat and we would spend money. So I found myself kind of like isolating a little bit because I didn't want to spend the money at that point. So I think it's an important point. We have to find activities that don't cost money to hang out with friends. That's a good thing. You don't always have to go out to eat. You don't always have to go shopping. Like, maybe you can just go somewhere and take a walk.
That is my most favorite thing to do. I love, anybody wants to go on a walk with me, I am always up for walks. I love nature. And so for me, the best thing to do is to go with a friend and to just go walking.
I think that's important, to try to find activities that you can do that don't, you know, cost money. Because I'm also, like, people don't just want to always eat food. You know, that's also like, sometimes I'm on a diet and I don't want to eat food. Like, there's so many reasons, and I'm like, oh, I want to hang out with a friend, but like, I just really don't want to go out to eat.
Right. And you need more options. And, you know, there's so many options like that don't cost money. You know, just even sitting in a park together. Or just going over to your house and cooking together, right? It doesn't have to be like, let's go out. Sometimes it's come over. Like, just sit with me. Just be with me. Even if you're not talking, even just like doing an activity together. Or I'm running for an errand. You know, I want to go to Home Goods. Can you come with me? And, you know, just drive together. I remember at one point, I needed to like pick something up in Costco. And I didn't want to do it alone. I wanted to, you know, I had free time, and I really wanted to spend it with a friend. And so I called my friend and I said, are you free? And she said, yeah. And I said, you want to come with me to Costco? I said, I know it's a weird invite. Like, you're coming with me to do my errands, but I want to be with you. So can you come? And she said, sure. And we had a really, really nice time. You know, we were able to speak in the car. You know, I didn't have to get a cart. We were able to hold the stuff because we were two people. And we were out of there in a few seconds after I got what I needed. And I was just so happy to do it with her.
That's nice.
But I think that's like atypical. Because generally, like, when we think of like hanging out with friends, like it has to be official, right? It has to be like, let's go do something. Like, let's have an activity that's like friend worthy.
I think that's good. Like taking a walk, doing errands, like those are good ideas.
That don't necessarily like cost money, but still can make you feel like you're with somebody and doing something.
Also going back to that, what you said about the friend who felt like she needed to have a baby. I know that now that like my son's getting a little bit older, I see that like it's really only pleasant to hang out with people that have kids the same age as him because then he's entertained. So I think that's just an interesting position for me to be in, to now look back that when I, because a lot of my friends had babies before me. So to look back at when maybe I wasn't, let's say, like invited, quote unquote, or I wasn't included, it didn't make sense for them because they needed kids the same age as their kid. And I'm noticing that the same way. Like if it's an afternoon and I'm with my son, like I'm going to try to text somebody to come join me who has someone to entertain my son. Like I'm not going to be able to enjoy a friendship with someone who doesn't have, because my son's going to be taking all my, attention. Right. But if he has a friend, then I can enjoy the company. So it's just interesting for me that now that I'm at this stage, that my son needs a friend the same age to reflect back of when I wasn't at that stage. And I saw him, and I remember friends saying that, like, oh, I need someone the same age as my kid or something like that.
Right.
And it sheds light to like, that past. So I think some people might also like
that becomes the first priority in the friendship.
Right. Because you can't enjoy a friendship anyhow if my son's not entertained. So therefore he needs entertainment. Now I'll enjoy it with whoever the mom is. Right. That's the most enjoyable. He's entertained right now.
Right. And that's like a commonality that the two of you will have, is like our children are entertained now by one another. So now we can just like,
enjoy, relax. Yeah. And I think it gets like even more specific about like, it's not just about my son having a kid the same age. It has to be someone that he likes. So like literally, like if I'm inviting someone for a meal at this point, like that's part of my calculation. Like, is my kid going to play nicely? Are they going to wreck my house together?
Right.
I have certain friends that I love and their son wrecks the house together. If she listens to this, I love you so much. Don't be insulted. I love you, and I love your son.
She's going to expect an invite next week.
Yes. But, sometimes that may go into the calculation.
Right. For sure it does. Lots of times like I'll invite friends over and they'll say it's just too hard, like, to bring the kids and to pack up the whole house, and this one only eats this food and that food, and they need these toys, and if they're out of their bed, like it's not going to be comfortable. And so it's not personal at that point. It's always just about like what's practical. Like it's not going to even be enjoyable to come because we can't enjoy each other's company. Right.
So then you have to find a different time if you want to spend time with those friends, like, in the evening, when the kids are sleeping and you can go out to find the time that makes sense. Like if I like Friday night, my kids are always sleeping by the meal. So then like I usually then invite people that I want to spend time with who don't necessarily, have kids the same age. That's what I do to try to get that time with them, and Shabbos lunch when all the kids are awake. If I'm going to invite a friend, then it's going to be someone the same age. Right. So I think that at a certain stage also, like friendships go in stages. It becomes very much about convenience.
Yes. I see this a bit with like in my mother's generation, where all the kids are out of the house,
right?
And they have all this free time now. And up until then, they've been maneuvering their lives and scheduling it around the kids. And now it's like there's a me,
right?
And you have to like recreate friendships and recreate a whole schedule because it's not as automatically filled with the busyness, and friends do take a larger part. But when it comes to though young mothers, right, or even not young mothers, if you have kids who are teens, it does influence your friendships. And I remember like speaking to a friend who had her first child, this was a while ago, and she was panicking. And she said, I don't have a life anymore. I can't even go out with friends. And I'm starting to feel resentment towards my child because everything is about the child and it's not about me anymore. And I want to just go out, or I want to just get a cup of coffee with someone, but I need to then make sure that the kid is going to childcare, and I love my baby, but I feel like I'm so torn.
Right.
And I wonder also, like, as you're talking about like the Shabbos meals and being limited in what types of friends you can invite over because of that, like, is it normative for people to start feeling maybe resentment or to feel trapped or to feel stuck by it and to feel like, where's the me? Right? Like, I want to do something, but every decision is made with my child.
Yeah, I think definitely there's a whole, conversation to be spoken about, like having your own identity while still having children, and how you are able to maintain that. I think for me, I've tried doing things that I wanted to do when I'm with my children, and I just realized it doesn't serve me. Like, I'm not going to enjoy going to the mall with my kids. Like, it's just not going to happen. I can do it, but then they'll be crying, So then I realized like it becomes selfish. I realized that I will enjoy my time more if I find him a play date in the park. So that way I can sit and relax to talk to the mom versus trying to, you know, put him in the stroller and taking a walk, because I love doing that. I realize he's getting too old for that, and I may have worked at one point. So, you know, we're going off topic a little bit from the friendships, but I think about finding ways to.
But I think it is though very relevant because there's your friendships, but then there's your child's friendships that you're fostering. Right. So your children are learning at that stage what friends need to be, what friends look like, what sacrifices we make for friendships.
Right. That's good points.
And so it's maybe a dual process.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting seeing you have friends, seeing you be social.
Right. Seeing you. And, you know, lots of times, like they say, like, if you take care of yourself, like your child will learn that, and they do mimic it so clearly. And so your friendships and your approach to friendships is what's going to be passed over. Right.
The importance of friendships that they'll see from you, and kind of circling back to how we started with feeling silly, it might come from things that we were told. So if the children see you honoring friendships, then they'll realize that this is something that they're allowed to honor.
Right. Right. And you know, how many times my parents say something like, I wish I could go out, but I have to watch you. Right. Or if you were tantruming right now, I can just go out to my friend, and why do you have to tantrum? Right. Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, I think that they're like those things get internalized.
Right. And on the flip side, I think that, you know, I definitely have some friends who have told me this, where they felt like their parents honored friendships for them. So that, you know, that's also like a big topic, I guess. And I think as moms, it's always hard to find that, you know, there's a lot of Jewish mom guilt. There's always hard to find that balance of, you know, wanting to put your child first, but also knowing that you need to take care of yourself and finding that balance.
Right. To make sure that you have the friends, and to make sure that you have the self-care, but also that your child feels attended to.
Right. Your child feels that they have your attention, and then they know that, you know, you have them.
And in the scheme of things, it's not that long. Right. Like if you put it into perspective of years of life. So if you are dedicating, you know, because it's really mostly the earlier years.
Right. So
that
they need more attention.
That they need more attention. And afterwards, they want to be more with friends. Right. They're not as clingy.
Right. And then it comes flipping. You see like moms like being like, but like hang out with me. Come out with me for lunch. You know?
Exactly. Like it flips. Like first the child wants the mom so badly. And then afterwards, they just want to, don't bother me. I want to just be with friends, which is normative in development. But for the mom to know, like, even though you might feel stifled at that point and you can't be with friends as much, it's not going to be forever.
Right. And I think that lets you to take the time and be present in that moment, because it's one day you're going to miss that. You know, one day you're going to wish you had more time with the little sticky hands crawling into your bed.
Yes. So what about people who don't feel like they have such a need for friends? Like, you know, maybe their social battery is not as big as
more
others.
Introverts also, I think we see that with.
Yeah, introverted, or just they prefer to be with themselves. They prefer to be more family oriented. You know, that's also an aspect of not everybody has the same social needs.
Right. That's 100% true. And I think that you have to be, if you're somebody, again, I'm talking a lot about myself, if you're somebody who does need more friends, you have to realize that other people it's not personal, but they may just like more alone time. So therefore they're less available to you.
Right.
I think I've seen that. I see that a lot with my spectrum of friends of people that are more introverted, and I know that, and I respect that, you know, and they kind of be like, yeah, you're more social, you know, right. I don't know how I feel about that, but you know, so there are people that need friendship, I don't think anyone needs friendship less, but need less time with friends. You know, they still like to know that they have their friendships, but you may only hear from them every few months.
Right. And that's not based on you. It's just based on their own needs.
Exactly. They don't need to touch base with their friends so much. And if they did, that would be stifling for them.
I kind of like imagine the Energizer Bunny. I don't know if you've ever seen like that commercial, like when we were kids, where like you have the Energizer batteries, right? Where there's the Energizer Bunny, and he's like hitting the drums, and he's just like running around for hours and hours and hours. And I'm always like, okay, my Energizer Bunny is like coming to a crash. Like that battery is not working anymore. Right. We all hit it, you know.
Right. Yes. Everyone has. Some people's capacity or tolerance is much bigger, but there's always a certain extent.
Right. And then there's also like for some people like being with friends rejuvenates them.
Right.
Like they really thrive. Other people, it's really draining being around friends.
Right.
They feel like they're performing. They feel like they're putting on a show, and they feel like they maybe just are filling normative, like behavioral
Social
expectation
rules,
or social rules. And they just have to do it. And so they do it, but it doesn't really fill them. They get more fulfillment while they're with themselves.
Right.
And so you see both of those. And I think, like, you know, originally what we were talking about is, well, if someone appears to be rejecting me, what is that really saying? And as we're speaking today, like, you see how there's so many variations of what their intentions can be.
Right.
Right. It's not necessarily, I don't want to be with you. Like, there's so much going on in their life, or they have a lower social battery, or, you know, they're not in the mood at that period in their life where they can, you know, be with friends, or maybe their spouse doesn't like the relationship because it's influencing the marriage. Like, there's so many pieces.
So it helps people realize that it's not so personal.
Right. It's not about you. It's really, stop taking things so personally. It's really not about you.
Right. I think that's like, might be like, I've been hearing this recently, like the one theme in life, like not everything's about you.
Right. Right. And, you know, it's so easy for us to go there of like, you know, what did I do wrong? Or what about me is this saying? Or what are they thinking? And it's like,
it's so freeing in a way to be like, it's not about me.
Right.
Like, I can just be, and other people's reaction is not about me.
Right.
It's about their own huge life that's going on within themselves.
Right. It's, you know, it really hit me hard. At one point I made a barbecue, and I was hosting a couple of friends, and it was loud and rowdy, and it was like one of the first of the seasons. And I remember feeling like, I want to make sure everybody's having such a good time.
Right.
Like, I want everybody to like, the pressure. And I wonder, like, why am I so pressured to make sure that everybody has such a good time? And, you know, I was relaxed about it in terms of like, I don't care if my house is dirty, right? Everything can be replaced technically. Like, okay, the floor gets dirty, you wash it afterwards, the dishes break. Okay, fine. You buy a new one. Like, for me, it wasn't so much about the cleanliness or the neatness. It was so important for me that everybody had a good time, because I really wanted them to enjoy. And I noticed that, you know, a couple of people weren't acting themselves.
Right.
And so my initial response was, oh no, like, what's going on here? Right. So it's like, what about me?
Right. I guess what I would be curious about is, well, where's this pressure coming from that everyone has to have such a good time?
Right. Yeah. And that's a really, really good question. And afterwards I stopped myself and I said, like, no, like, I know they're going through stuff in their personal life. And afterwards that night I got a text from them saying, you know, this was really, sorry if I wasn't acting myself. Like, this is what was going on. Thank you so much. Like, we had such a nice time.
Again, circling back to that, it's not about you.
It's not about me. It was not. And, you know, if it is all about us, it's always good to ask that question, because sometimes we need to change things. Right. And to keep ourselves aware.
Yeah.
But to not take it so personally. So that way there's that pressure of like, sometimes it's going to be more exciting and sometimes less. Right. And it's not about the party. It's more about what people are going through in their personal daily lives. Yeah. And, you know, to answer your question, which I avoided.
Don't think I didn't notice, but I was going to let
that's
you
like
go.
the hardest thing doing a podcast with a therapist.
I know.
Because you're not going to let me get away with anything.
No, I was going to be like, okay, I'll wait till this recording's done, then I'll bring it back.
Right. You're going to need therapy sessions after the podcast.
Exactly.
So, why is it so important that they have a good time? Like, I think that there's that pleasing aspect of, I like being around people that are happy and that they're satiated. And I want my house to be a house that people have good memories in. And I want them to come back. Right. I want to know that they're going to like coming and that the friendship is going to continue and that it's going to be pleasant. But then again, I always also have to think, like, if I'm worrying about that too much, I'm going to become too intense. And then all of my fears are going to come back. 100%. So, you know, I really need to catch myself in that. But yeah, these things, right. And again, so embarrassing. Why do I care?
Right. And also flipping it back from, it's not all about us. I think for me, it's interesting what I've learned from today. It's also not always about them. Like, the feelings that are coming up for me when I'm with somebody might not be about them.
Right.
Which is like mind blowing, I think. So I think, like, it's not always about you, but it's also not always about them. It's just like two, like, you know, thoughts.
Right.
And yeah, circling back to what you were saying about, like, it's silly to talk about, you know, that shame is probably coming from, you know, expectations of that we're supposed to be over this. But I think, you know, giving permission of that we're not supposed to be over this, because friends are so important. So it should be a life process, a life journey, a life struggle.
It is. And, it's something that we're always going to be talking about. And it comes back to ourselves. It comes back to situations. And, so many times for people, one of the core pieces of friendships is or one of the worries that people have a lot is, I don't want to be a burden. Like, I don't want to be that person who becomes annoying, and I don't want to impose on you too much. Or what if you don't want to hang out with me? Like, you've ever been in a conversation with someone of like, let's hang out. It's like, what do you want to do? Well, what do you want to do? Like, well, I want to do what you want to do. And it's like, well, let's just settle this together. And you both want to be together. You both want to spend time together. Like, there's no burden. None of you feel like you're a burden for each other. Like, and it's okay. Like, just hang out. Like, just do it. Or like, when it comes to like making plans, like, it should be simple to make plans.
Right. But sometimes it's so complicating.
It could be so complicated.
When are you available? When am I available? What do you want to do?
Because to make plans with friends, right? Just speaking about what we were speaking about today is to make, the schedules have to align. You need coverage for babysitting. Right. You need off from work. Right. You need to make sure that you're on the same financial status that if I want to go, let's say, out to dinner and spend $200, can you spend $200 or vice versa? If you want to spend $1,000, do I want to spend $1,000? Or if we're going on a vacation together, do I want to spend the same amount? Do we have the same interests and activities? I might love walking, but you hate the sun.
Right.
And you like just sitting. Yeah. Right? It's not going to work. And so there's so many like questions that come up. And I think a lot of people like say like, it's just not worth it.
The energy.
Like, it's just not worth investing in that. And I think it really is worth it though. And to say like, it's supposed to be this way. Right. It's supposed to be complicated. Like you're just two different people. It's not easy to make plans, but don't expect it to be any different.
I think we fall back though on the friends that are easy to make plans with, because there are always those people that it just works.
Yes.
And then there's always people that it's more complicating. And I think I found myself losing touch with the people that it's more complicating and sticking with the people that it's easier. Because you end up spending more time, which leads you to make more plans. The friend that likes to go walking, like we go walking a lot together, So I think that, again, it circles back to that it sometimes becomes situational of like who's available at the time that you're available. And that's the friend that you end up spending more time with.
Right. It's just easier.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean that it's not a true great relationship. It's just you're not necessarily exploring all your options because, it becomes about, you don't have so much time. So whoever's available now is the friend that, you're going to reach out to.
Your go-to.
Yeah. And I have, at one point I was also taking a lot of walks, and I have one friend who walks a lot. So we go walking a lot. Like, it just works. And, you end up spending time with people that it just works.
Right. Yeah. That's going to be the connector.
Yeah.
So why don't we take some questions?
Yeah. Let's see what we got.
One of the questions, let me just read this. How is a friend different than a spouse?
Well, it's not a romantic relationship.
Right.
For starters, I think that, there could be components of friends that are similar to spouses. The part where you have good emotional conversations, the part where you go out and have a, fun time. I think I would say the few differences is, right, it's not a romantic relationship. The commitment level is different,
I think your friends are not always with you.
Right.
So that makes it much easier, right? And they're not emotionally involved in things as much as
they're
your
not involved
spouse
in every
is.
aspect of your life.
So they can validate you in areas that maybe your spouse can't because your spouse is so
in it with you.
Right. So they can say something like, that is so frustrating. Whereas if your spouse would say that is so frustrating, they might have a harder time with it because they don't agree.
Right. And they might see it from a different perspective, right? Let's say you want to complain about your in-laws, for example, in the famous conversation. You can't really do that with your husband.
No. Yeah.
So you have a friend for that.
Right.
So they can fill different needs.
Very, very different needs. I think there's also the gender component.
Right.
Of, sometimes girlfriends just get things.
Right.
Right. And sometimes men connect more with men. They just understand their minds better.
Right.
And their ways of thinking or the realities of what it is to be a male in the world or a female in the world.
Right.
Sometimes like if I'm going through something, I think through my mind, like, who's the best person to tell this to now? Like
100% all the time. Literally.
It's like, and I go through and like, I sort of like walk myself in my mind of saying like, what answer do I want?
Right,
and then I'm like, okay, this friend will say this. This friend will say that.
Who's going to also understand the like little details of it? Like who's going to have that, emotional intelligence that I need for the specific question.
Right. Who's like privy to that in my life.
Right. Who already knows the story so I don't have to start from the beginning.
Yes.
That's also hard. Like, who already knows this relationship with friend A so I can discuss what she just told me instead of having to explain the relationship from the beginning.
Right.
And again, it's circling back to a lot of times it's the friends that are in your everyday life because they may know more about what's going on. Right. But then sometimes I'll call a friend who knows nothing about it. And I'm like, okay, hear this from the beginning so you can give me an opinion on this one little comment that happened today. Let me tell you everything about Shira Kessler. I'm joking.
And do you have those friends who are also like maybe distant in your life that you feel like they will never connect on a day-to-day basis so you can share certain
That's
private
what I'm
things with
saying.
them?
You can like call them and be like, okay, this is the situation. Like you don't know anything that's going on right now. So I can like just explain it to you without any preconceived thoughts and notions because you don't know this person. You don't know all the details 100%.
And it's never going to get back to them also. Right. Sometimes I just like sharing a story and putting it onto somebody and saying like, I need you to hold this because like the people close by can't really hold it. Because it'll just intertwine too much.
Right. I think that certain people have different tolerance of friendships and it might be like that boredom might be a sign of that you've kind of reached your limit. That's on one hand. And the other component can be about knowing that it's okay to have, silence or boredom in a relationship. It always doesn't need to be so stimulating.
Like sometimes we could just sit in the quiet.
Yeah.
We don't need to like fill up every moment and talk every moment.
Right.
Yeah. I think also boredom sometimes can mean that maybe we're not sharing enough of ourselves.
It's more
like
too
maybe
superficial.
we're shutting down. Maybe like there's
disconnecting.
Right. We need to go more personal.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. I think that's a good question of when we find ourselves bored.
Yeah. We touched on a lot of different topics, which I always love doing. That leads us to like 10 different podcasts that we can do based on this one podcast. But the topic of friends, it's, whether people want to admit it or not, I think that it has a big impact on people's life. And you know what? It might have different value for different people also. Like this might be something that's really important to me. And for someone else, it doesn't have that much value. But it can be so beneficial, so uplifting in someone's life to surround yourself with good people, with good friends. And it might be hard to achieve, that superficially, to externally find those friends and also internally to get to a place to be comfortable with your friends without all the insecurities coming up.
I think when people don't have friends and don't have enough friends, right? Everyone needs at least one friend.
Right.
And so at that point, it can lead to extreme loneliness.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, even though today we have the ability to connect, between social media and between phone, and there's just so much more availability to connect, but there's so much more inherent loneliness. And I think one of the things that helps loneliness is really, really good friends.
Right. And it might be putting in more effort than you thought you had to, or that you thought was culturally inappropriate. Like, right. I think that what I'm coming away with today was really ingrained in us for some reason, which I'm going to want to do a little bit more research on why, but it was ingrained in us that this is a silly conversation to talk about. You should be done with it in high school. And I think that what we're coming out with today is that it's not silly, that it is important. Yeah. And therefore you might have to put in more effort into friendships.
Yes.
If you want that level of friendships.
More effort, and also to expect there to be struggles in it, expect there to be internal.
Right.
And, and just to like end off with one point, which I thought was, thought worthy, is oftentimes like we could be very, very busy, especially in this life stage of like so many responsibilities, busy with people.
Yeah.
But we're still lonely.
Right.
And being around people doesn't mean necessarily that you're friends with them.
Right.
And it doesn't necessarily mean that they're filling that friendship need.
Right.
And you can still have lots of people coming through your day, but are you really connecting in that friend level that then can take away that loneliness? And don't confuse busy with connecting. Right.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I think that can lead to people just noticing like how you're connecting with people, and that maybe you want to start being a little bit more vulnerable with your friends.
Yeah.
In order to make them real friendships.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Well, this definitely was a great session for me.
I hope we're still friends after this.
How much do I owe you? How much do you charge? I really appreciate it. Yes. I brought up a lot of, thoughts in my head, a lot of interesting points. And I think that we, touched upon also some cool points.
Yeah. Some just important things about friendships. And I think that there's a whole lot more to discuss.
Yeah. Thank you. Alrighty. See you next week. Bye-bye.